these past few weeks, I had the opportunity to take a little vacation time. I wanted to leave the city for just a little bit of time, and that's just what I did. I grew up in the mountains in northern New Mexico in a rural community, so living in the city can be a little challenging at times with just how much is going on, with just how much is happening all the time. I was able to go home for a little, in which I spent time just listening to the birds, the wildlife that surrounds my childhood home. I was able to spend some time just watching the sunsets, and there was such peace found in those moments. There's such peace found in those moments. But one afternoon, I noticed a huge plume of smoke rise up into the air, and it was massive. A fire had erupted roughly 15 to 20 miles from my childhood home, and all the fears began to set in. What happens if it reaches my community? Where does my family go if it reaches their home? How do they rebuild? These are the same questions that I imagine were being asked last year by the communities that were affected by the Calf Canyon and Hermit's Peak fire. I imagine these are the same questions being asked now by those in Hawaii who have lost everything. Where do they go? What happens now? These seem like moments reminiscent of the fears and anxiety that is felt by the disciples as they are thrown around in the boat. These seem like the chaotic moments that Elijah encountered in the earthquake, the heavy winds, the fire. But even in these moments of chaos, of destruction, God was still able to be found. God was still able to be grasped. God was still able to be heard. For Elijah, it is in the quiet whisper. For Peter, it's Christ who extends his hand when he became afraid. And I bet even after Peter had been questioned on his doubting by Jesus, Jesus, without hesitation, would have extended his hand again had Peter called out once more. And in fact, he did in the resurrection. And he does it here in this celebration, in this Eucharistic celebration, which we gather together every Sunday. What about for those who are still asking questions in the face of destruction from these wildfires, both here in our own backyard and in Hawaii? Where's Jesus' hand? Where is God's quiet whisper? Maybe he's the small whisper found in the community who supports and gathers around one another, because maybe that's all that's left. Maybe all that's left is God in the midst of each other. God in the midst of the families as they grieve and mourn their loved ones, as they grieve and mourn everything they lost. I don't think it's a maybe that God is present in the midst of all of them. I think it is a fact that God is present with them in their suffering as they gather and surround one another and be with each other. There can be found Christ extending his arm in the midst of each other. All of us here, no matter what walk of life we have lived, no matter our background, no matter where we are right now, we've all been faced with doubts. We have all been faced with fear. We have all experienced some sort of chaos or suffering. And maybe we feel that we have been in that boat with the disciples, being thrown around on the sea. Maybe we've experienced the chaos that is the earthquakes, the fires, the winds that shake our lives. What are these moments which have shaken us? What are those things in our lives from which we are still recovering? No matter what it is that shakes our boat in the waters of life, or the chaos that stems from the earthquakes, winds, and fires in our own lives, we can always cry out to God, asking help. We see it right here in the gospel, as Peter himself cries out in faith, as he is overcome with fear and doubt, and Jesus extends his hand immediately. Jesus extends his hand immediately. This faith which Peter expressed in Jesus, it's the same faith which moves us to turn our face toward God and cry out. This faith was shown to me during the pilgrimage for vocations as we walked through the communities devastated by these forest fires last year. So much was gone, and they didn't know what was going to happen to their communities. But they knew they could cry out to God in these difficult times, in these difficult moments. And they heard that small voice. They reached out and grabbed onto Christ's hand in the midst of chaos. But it doesn't mean that it will get any easier. And that was evident as they continue to recover from these fires. But they know things will be okay because through it all, God walks beside them, ready to pick them up and continue walking with them. As we walked through the burn scar, one of the men on my route, he pointed out to all of us just how green it is. He saw beauty in something so devastating, something for him that was so painful to look at. But even in the midst of all of that, he heard the whisper. He reached out to grab the hand that was extended to him so that God could continue guiding him, so that God could continue walking with him. There was hope. There was hope. And God does the same for us. No matter what we're going through in our own lives, whether it is a storm within our families, or we're just experiencing something painful in our lives right now, we can always and are encouraged to cry out to God. Christ knows that we will stumble and fall. He knows that we will go through difficult moments. He knows that we will experience fear and doubt and worry. But Christ, as Pope Francis writes, is present beside us even before we begin to seek him. So in faith, seek him. Ask for him. Cry out to him. But as we cry out in faith to God in moments of fear, worry, and doubt, will we latch on to the hand of Christ that he extends to us? In moments of fear, worry, and doubt in our own lives, will we listen for the silent whisper? The choice is yours.